Welcome to USC Rossier's About the Author series. My name is Tom Arteaga, and I serve as the Director of Alumni Engagement. Now, our About the Author series introduces our community to a USC alumni author. We'll explore the author's latest work and learn about the process to get published. So today's episode features inspiring work of Dr. Sebastian Puccio, an Argentine-American educator, advocate, and public speaker. Dr. Puccio's book, Morning Mental Activation, is an inspiring guide towards self-discovery and awakening. The book is designed to help you better understand how to take the next right step in life as life presents its little challenges. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Puccio. Thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate you.
Hey, Tom, it's great to be here, and thank you for developing this amazing platform so that our Trojan authors can share their work. So thank you. It's an honor.
Wonderful. Let's get right into it. Can you please start off by telling us about your book?
Okay. Morning Mental Activation, or as the Spanish edition is titled, Activación Mental Matutina. It's a guide. It's a workbook and it's a guide, and it started as something that I used for myself as I faced a challenge, as life presented itself with a locally advanced cancer diagnosis, meaning the cancer had advanced to the largest or furthest spot without spreading, and so that was life-changing. And so I needed to create something for me that was going to help me navigate and take those steps as those challenges presented itself. And so that's how Morning Mental Activation was born. It was a practice that I practice in the morning to activate my thoughts so that I can grow that resilience, that inner strength that we all have. That's already within us. It was about developing that inner strength. And so Morning Mental Activation is just a series of morning exercises, if we want to call it that, activities. Some people call it affirmations. It is whatever language you want to give it, but it's just what I did in the morning and what I teach through the book. As a teacher that I am myself, I teach in the book something that you can do for yourself to help you take that next step as you're facing that challenge.
Great. Is the book set up in a way where you read it cover to cover and then put that into practice, or do you read it kind of step by step and do those steps?
What a great question. So, Tom, the book is assigned for you to read it. So obviously there's an introduction section that kind of explains how the book works, and I provide you with a very clear tool, how to use a Post-it and writing the message. However, what I've found is that everyone has kind of taken it and used it in a way that works for them, which was the idea behind the book. The idea was not for me to say, this is how you need to do it. I'm no one to do that, but you know what you need for yourself. And so some people open the book and they work on what's on that page. Some people follow it sequentially. That's up to you how you best see it working for yourself. Some people I encourage them to use a Post-it. Some people have been very, very creative. I've received all types of feedback from different folks who have been using it and how some of them follow this journal prompt. So the book has a lot of open space. And the idea behind the open space is for you to create your own perspective, your new perspective as you're facing whatever it is that you're facing.
That's great. And I'm thankful that you are healthy and doing well now. So that is wonderful news. So I mean that challenge you faced, I mean, that seems like that's kind of what inspired you, right? To write the book.
So I think that challenge is more of a catalyst, right? The inspiration is deeper. I think that the inspiration, I know the inspiration goes back a long time, and I say that resilience is already within you because I believe that that's something we learn early on in life. And for me, it wasn't until I took a trip. So as part of my recovery process, I decided to go back to Argentina. Spent a few months, and I was fortunate enough to spend 3 months in Argentina, in my hometown of Rosario. And while visiting there, I remember, and Rosario just contextually, it's northwest, about 4 hours northwest of Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina. And so beautiful city built along the Paraná River, which flows from Brazil to the Atlantic Ocean. And so as I spent time there in my hometown, I remember where I began to get these lessons, and that's really where I began to see the connection to what was in the writing to what had taken place early on in life. And so I remember the first lesson, which was from my grandfather. And my grandfather talked about yoga, walking. So he would walk me to school. My parents worked, and he talked about yoga a lot. And I always found it funny. So not obviously you don't know my grandfather, but I do. Grandpa's from northern Spain, Asturias, a very traditional man, not your idea of a yogi, right? But and yet he talked about having that flexibility, finding that balance. And I think that's what yoga taught him, and that's what he was trying to teach me as a young kid. And obviously as an adult, I understand that today. And so that there's that piece, and morning mental activation teaches you to find that balance. Balance greets change like an old friend when you're facing a challenge. And so that's one of the inspirations that began, right, to develop this book. Grandma is my other inspiration. Grandma taught me to look at beauty, to find beauty in those seeming moments that you think, how could this be beautiful? And again, I didn't understand. I wasn't aware at the moment that that lesson, how important it was. And let me share this story. As I sat for during chemotherapy with the nurse, that's not something that you would think that's beautiful, right? Because it's not a fun moment. And yet I found the beauty in that individual, in that nurse, providing me that tool and being so incredibly kind. That's beauty. And so when we're facing a challenge, having the capacity to find that balance, to find that grounding, and to see the beauty in those difficult moments, that's the inspiration. And that is what's in the book.
That's wonderful. That is beautiful. And I love the connection you have with your grandparents. And do you know sort of with your grandfather's experience, sort of where yoga, how he got introduced
How
to
did that
yoga?
come in? Yeah, I mean, it's something that he practiced with my grandmother, and they'd
Nice.
have their senior yoga classes, and so he would go to that, and I think that's where as an adult, as a grown person, he picked that up, and again, he was a man of few words, but what he said was powerful, and so that stayed with me so many years later, right? And even my grandmother is still alive. She's 95 years old. I mean, to me, she's my hero. She survived cancer twice, and she's still going strong at 95. And so she still finds that beauty, those moments of beauty, and she focuses on that. And so I think it's developing those skills. And the book teaches you how to develop those skills that again, they're lessons that are within us. For me, those are the two lessons that I recall the most. For you, you may have different lessons that your family, someone in your life has taught you. And the idea behind the book is to pull those lessons back up to the surface so that you realize, hey, I am strong. I can face the challenges that are ahead of me, whatever they may be. In my case, it was cancer, right? For you, it may be something else. It may be divorce. It may be the difficulties of a job. Whatever that challenge may be, that difficulty presents itself differently for each of us at different phases in our life. But that resilience is within us. We are stronger than we think we are. And so it's about exercising and pulling that out of us. I always tell people, I said, hey, you don't go to the gym and have muscles. You don't go one time and have muscles, right? You have to keep going. You have to have that persistence, which is why the routine, the morning part of the title of the book, developing that morning routine so that you are practicing this every single day. You wake up, you break your fast, right? You have breakfast, you nourish your body. How are you nourishing your mind? How are you preparing yourself to face whatever it is that the day is bringing? And that's something we have to do every day, whether it's through morning mental activation or through whatever other tools that exist that we have available to us. We have to build that routine in. And for me, this is what I built in.
And I really love that idea of building that routine. It's that positive reinforcement of routine, because you're right. I think all of us, those sort of negative thoughts and negative feelings just kind of build up over time. And sometimes that becomes the voice we hear most often in our own minds, our own heads. So that idea of practicing and making a commitment daily, right?
That's right.
To work on that.
Yes.
I love
And
that.
being able, and having the strength to silence that internal critic that we often hear.
Yeah.
And so, you know, again, which wolf do you feed? You know, are you going to feed the wolf that's going to move you forward, right? And so that old tale. So it's the same idea behind that. Yes.
And I think you touched on this sort of is something you'd like your readers to take away. Is it those two areas that you hope that the reader would take away from this?
Yeah, and ultimately for them to find you know, the book's written with love, and so and it's not just my words, it's the words of grandma, grandpa, it's the words of that nurse that helped me during chemo, it's the word of those friends that were there to support me during the difficult moments, it is the words are part of the doctors that were there assisting me. It is a holistic teacher, lives in Ohio, that she assists me for 1.5 years, and we work together. It is, you know, in my entire wraparound team that I had during a difficult time, it is just a collection of their hearts, their words, their support, their kindness. And it's with that frequency that the book's written. It's with that frequency of love. And so what I hope people take away is that it's inspiring because there's a lot of love, and that love manifests in the form of a book. But it was a team of people that wrap around you and to show you that even during a difficult time, there's this whole team of folks that are helping you. But at the end of the day, you do have to do the work yourself to take that next step.
That's great. That's great. And you said you've heard you've gotten response from individuals. Share a little bit of that with us. What sort of response are you hearing from?
So I've gotten, yeah. So it's been really cool. So I received emails, social media messages about how it's impacted them. And so when I started testing out the format for the book, and we'll talk, I think, you know, I want to talk more about the publishing process, but when I started testing out how I wanted to put it together, I started having friends read it. And I wanted to see what was their reaction as they read it. And so one of the things I saw or found was that as people read it, there was a particular message in the book that would stop them. And so I'm thinking back to a friend of mine. And so I said, hey, do you mind reading this aloud? He's like, really? You're gonna I go, just do me a favor, just read it aloud for me. So I'm watching his reaction as he's interacting with the book. And he gets to a particular message and he stops. And then he starts talking. He starts reflecting. He starts meditating, whatever language you want to give that moment of that aha moment, right? When your brain goes, oh, I get this. And then he looks at me and he goes, I get it. And I said, you gave me exactly what I needed. I needed to see how putting it together in this format, this different format with that's not that I don't think it follows a traditional book format, right? But putting it in this format allowed you for this to be kind of like a mirror, like, oh, I get this about me. And so this is what I'm learning about me in this moment. And this is what I'm understanding. It's creating that new perspective. And in that perspective, that's where you develop those muscles.
Right. That's great. That's great. And we'll definitely dive into the more of the writing process and the publishing process as well. But I'd like to shift and let's talk about you for a minute, right? Let's talk about the author. So could you share with us sort of your professional journey and sort of what led you to where you are now?
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, so we kind of talked about, I moved to the United States when I was 11 years old. And so I grew up in a California that's very vastly different than it is today. Right. So, you know, I was a non-English speaker when I arrived at schools here in Downey, California. You know, I wasn't aware as a kid of the difficulties, you know, with you know, banning Spanish in the use of schools at that time, right? It's just a very socio-politically challenging time in California. And so, but I always wanted to go to college. I knew that I said, I may not know English now, but I'm going to get there. I want to go to college. I want to do that. So I ended up attending Cal State Long Beach as an undergraduate, received a BA in Spanish linguistics and broadcast journalism. I wanted to be a Telemundo news anchor. And after doing an internship, I did not necessarily love that world. But I started teaching, and actually I started working as a bilingual college aide in Long Beach Unified, and fell in love with the teaching profession at that time. And shortly thereafter, a year later, I was teaching at that same school. I was a middle school teacher, high school teacher. Then I became an assistant principal of a middle school, high school. I was a public information officer. I was a middle school principal, K-8 principal, high school principal. So I worn quite a few hats. I thought I was a adjunct faculty at Cal State Long Beach at the College of Education. So I wore a number of hats in the profession, and I've loved every single one.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Now let's shift into the writing process for you a little bit.
Okay,
Just
sure.
sort of like, when did that start? When did it start? Sort of how long that took? Just sort of that writing process.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this question, and the writing process really began. So when I started reading a book by Julia Cameron, it's called The Artist's Way. And again, she writes it again kind of like a workbook, in that she encourages you to do these morning pages, this morning ritual, in which you just free write every single morning, and you do it. Set a timer for whatever long, and you write. So that's really began that writing process, and so chemo was long, so I would sit there for 5-6 hours. So plenty of time to read books, and so I used that time to nourish my mind with this book and begin that writing process. And shortly thereafter, this idea of developing these post-its with messages to myself came from listening to different folks. And I think I shared with you the team of people that were that surrounded me. So these messages came from that, and I just began practicing that, and then as a result of that, the book kind of wrote itself, right? So I had I had all these tools right in front of me that I said, wow. And so really what made me think I need to put this in a book format was a friend was at my home, and I had the Post-its on the refrigerator. And she said, can I borrow this one? She's, I really like this. And I thought, why do you like it? I said, yeah, absolutely. But why do you like it? And so she said how it spoke to her. And I thought, man, that's if that spoke to her and it spoke to me, maybe it'll speak to someone else. And so that writing process kind of just happened. I don't want to say haphazardly, but it kind of evolved over a period of time, right? And ultimately the book wrote itself.
Oh, wow. And at what point were you at that kind of point when you identified like these are speaking to other people and were you thinking book initially, or was there other material, like another way of sort of sharing that information? Like what was that sort of thought process like when you're like, when did you kind of see like, oh no, this is a book that I could?
Interesting. So yeah, so I wanted to tie my story, right? So the way it's written, there are 30 out of all the, I ended up with like about 100 messages, but I thought there were some that were very personal to me. So I thought, well, I'm not sure if that applies, and it might. I don't know. I took the ones that were very general, that were very broad, that could apply to anyone's lives, and I weaved my story of resilience right through the book. And so it's, the message is there, and then an explanation of how the message applied to me. That's where my story came in. And so I wanted to show that story of resilience lives within us, and it can be expanded, amplified through the practice, through that morning practice. And so that is kind of how I wove the story through the book.
Right. So you've got to go through the writing process. Now that sort of next step, right, for publishing. Can you tell us about your experience publishing?
Well, that was fun. So it is fun. It's a lot of fun. But you really have to try what works for you. So obviously I went the self-publishing route, and the reason I went the self-publishing route, I reached out to a number of publishing companies, and people are really wonderful. They will give you 20, 15, 30 minutes of their time free, and you get a lot of questions answered. And having been published before, obviously dissertation through the USC process, you understand the publishing process as an individual, but you just, you want to talk to different people and see what works best for you. And so my challenge for me was going to be finding somebody who was going to do the layout of the book, and who was going to do the illustrations. And I quickly realized I had all of those resources within my network. One of my high school, someone I've known since high school, is an illustrator. And so I reached out to him. He's like, Sebastian, it would be my honor to like help you with this. One of my best friends, he's laid out multiple books before. He's done all the art direction of the book, who ended up doing, my friend Heber, who did all of that work. And so super, super fortunate in that I had everything, all the resources around me. And then the rest was just uploading it to a website, sending it in within their formatting rules and so forth, and it's live. So, but it was a process. Most of that process took place. It was really exciting. So I did most of that while I was in Argentina. So I had a good draft, solid draft of the book by last November, November 22. And then I worked on it while I was in Argentina. So there was this cafe by the river that I used to go in the mornings. And my friend, one of my friends, the one that was doing the art director, he was in Portugal at the time. And the artistic, the illustrator was here in Southern California. And here I was in Argentina, time zone halfway between the two. And so coordinating that was a lot of fun. And by June, it was published.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, kind of reflecting on that process for you, could you share maybe a little advice that you might share with somebody who's maybe considering writing or in the process of, just any advice from what you've experienced for someone else who's interested in doing the same?
So the most useful thing for me was to just start. And so that morning practice of just free writing every morning, you have to start there. And then I went through about 5 different iterations of what I wanted to write. I mean, I had a storyline with lessons in between, and I tried different formats and different ways of doing it. And I would get to point like, this isn't what I'm trying to create. This isn't. And so just know that like any artist, you're sculpting something, you're drafting something, you're creating something, and as you're creating, like, no, this isn't it, and you start over. And so, and it's that process, and then eventually it just lands, and it all comes together, and you'll know, and it's just the process, and sometimes you have to put it down for a while. Other times, there were days that it just flowed, and so it's different every day, and you have to be open to what it looks like, and just have no expectations, just kind of flow from that place of expectancy and just watching it grow.
That's great. Did you have individuals in your circle that had written books or had experience that you could sort of talk to about this? Or
so yes, I do. And so I reached out to a number of them, and asked for their support and said, hey, how did you deal with this particular challenge, or how did you do this piece? And so, and everyone's experience is a little different. There's some similarities and some differences, and so you kind of work through that, and you have that, and then other things you figure out, you charge, you keep going.
Great. Well, let's shift one more time. Sure. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your USC experience. Can you talk to us about maybe some highlights from your student experience, or just some key takeaways from your USC experience?
So one of my favorite memories, and probably one of the things I've learned the most through the doctoral program at USC, was my international experience. So I had the opportunity to go to Costa Rica to do our research for our dissertation. And again, being Latino, it was wonderful to be in a Spanish-speaking country, watching how those educators prepare their students. And so being able to take away the gold, the diamonds, right? All the beautiful pieces from what they do, and bring that back here to the United States so that we can instruct our students using those best practices. And so, and just being in a different culture, and bonding with your colleagues, and your fellow students in a different way outside, right? The off campus, literally. But in a very academic way. And so that's one of the things I remember the most, and love Dr. Escalante for that opportunity he gave me.
Wonderful. Well, we appreciate sort of going through the process, the publishing. We talked about your USC experience. I wanted to jump back for just a second because at the very beginning of our conversation, you talked about translating the book, right? So the book is you have an English and a Spanish version of the book. So I wanted to just jump back to that for just a second. What was that process like for you to get the translation done of your book?
Yeah, so obviously I'm fluent in English and Spanish, both formal and informal Spanish. So that was not difficult to do. I mean, there were essentially my words. There were areas. That's a whole other process that took, and it took a team. Obviously, you're not just like you're editing the English version and you're sending it to an editor and having people look at it and sending you notes and feedback. It was the same with the Spanish. Just it was more about making sure that there were words that would land the way I wanted them to land, and so that was probably the hardest part. Finding there were certain things that did not translate the way I wanted it to. So it took a little bit of work around that. So that took about 2 months to do, but it was, again, for me, that was probably out of this whole publishing process, that was the greatest part. I've been published before beyond my dissertation, so it was the first time I had anything published in Spanish in my native language, and so that it meant a lot to me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that's kind of where I went. I was like, I imagine that feeling of being able to share your work with your family and with that's wonderful.
Yes.
So what's next for you?
So I'll answer that right now. But I love this question, and here's why I love this question, because I think that goes into this culture, right? Into the culture in which we live. It's like, hey, Dr. Puccio, you survived chemo, radiation, surgery. You were a principal during all that time. You wrote a book, published in English and Spanish. What's next? And it's kind of like, oh man, I'm tired. Like, that's a lot, right? But we have to realize that, it's great to have dreams and to be motivated to have goals and plans for our future. But sometimes it's okay to just say, I am here. This is where I am. What's next is take a breath. What's next is enjoy dinner with those loved ones. What's the point of rushing if we leave the ones we love behind, right, in the dust, and to achieve that goal? And so being present is really important. So that's definitely what's next. But also beyond that, in going into, I just said having dreams. One of the things that I've created along with the book is a workshop, both in English and in Spanish. And the workshop is really teaching folks how to use this tool, how to use these tools that I have in the book, and how to prepare themselves in facing these challenges. If it's a parent group, as parents can't help their kids unless they themselves know how to face these challenges. Teachers have to be able to understand how to build that strength, have that practice. The teaching profession is very difficult today, and so how do they become strong individuals so that they can do what they need to do for their students, for their families? And so that's really what I've developed that goes along with the book, and it's this workshop, and it's both in English and Spanish because I really wanted to reach out to a broader audience, and so that's what's next.
That's great. And the workshops, you've been doing those workshops. What's some of the responses from individuals?
Yeah, so I've had an opportunity to do it a couple of times already, and it's and both in one in a group setting, and then the other one in a one-on-one setting or two-on-one setting, more like a coaching type of service. And the feedback that I receive has just been amazing. It's just they're using the tools every day. They're developing a practice, and they're able to look past whatever it is challenges that they're facing. Challenges come. I mean, that's no tool, nothing can stop that, right? That's just life. But it's about how we face them and how we look at that challenge as we move forward.
And what a great opportunity to be able to share that message with students, right? Yeah. To so that they get into that practice early. Adults, we need that help. We need that practice as well.
Absolutely.
But if, any intervention, we can get that into individuals' practices early on.
Yes,
I'm sure will be beneficial.
Regardless whether you're facing a challenge. I mean, again, like I said, using the analogy of a gym, you want to have those muscles, you have to practice every day, whether you're in need of exercise or not, right? So we need to do that every day and have a practice. And whether my message is whether you use morning mental activation, any other tool, it's really important to develop that practice in the morning and to nourish your mind.
That's great. That's great. We've dropped a link to your website in the chat. That's the best way to get a hold of you, contact you, learn more about you, learn about workshop opportunities, and also with a link there on your website to purchase the book. And you have the books available on Amazon through your website there.
Yes.
Well, this has been really nice. A wonderful opportunity to
Awesome.
connect with you, learn more about you and your experience. Thank you for sharing this with us.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on the work you've done with your book and the way you're helping others and providing this as a resource to help so many people. We really appreciate that. We really
thank you, Tom. I appreciate you. Thanks, man.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. That's right. Thank you, and fight on. We'll see you next time. Take care.